The Engadine Valley in the Swiss Alps. St. Moritz to Celerina is the historic track that is the oldest and only remaining artificial ice track in the ice sliding business. Hello everybody, I'm Martin Haven, alongside me American-US Olympian Kurt Tomasevich, as we get ready for the second of 4 heats of the Bauhaus FIBT two-man bobsleigh world championship at this home of ice sliding. And if the first heat is anything to go by, we're in for an absolutely fascinating finish to this world championship race, run over 4 heats. Well, it's been a good news, bad news kind of a day for German coach Christoph Langen. Good start from Thomas Florschutz, but brakeman Kevin Kuska paid the price. He's pulled a hamstring. He may be out for the whole fortnight. Tied for third place in his brand new BMW sled is the defending two-man world champion and four-man world champion, coincidentally, Steve Holcomb of the USA. He's tied with Alexander Zubkov, but they are 47 hundredths of a second, nearly half a second away from the leaders after the first heat. Zubkov is expected to be an outright front runner in the four-man competition as well, but a year out from the Olympic Games, give or take a couple of weeks, is he in the sort of condition that will win him a two-man gold medal as well. He won in 2011, he could do it again here, but he needs 3 great runs to catch the men in front, among whom are Bert Hefti and Thomas Lamparter for Switzerland. Hefti was a 4-man gold winner in 2007, the last time the Worlds were here in St. Moritz, behind his driver Ivo Rugg. He's never won a World Championship gold as the two-man on home ice. This might be the chance to do it. But he too has some work to do, because he lies a clear 2/10 shy of our runaway first-round leader. The junior 2- and 4-man world champion, Francesco Friedrich, with the awesome starting of Janis Becker behind him. He was fastest starter, tying with Hefti, and set fastest times and top speeds at every mark down the track. The 23-year-old German has already established himself beyond question on that run alone as a threat anytime he's on the ice. Kurt Tomasevich, that was the first of our 2 heats, and Friedrich leads by 2/10 of a second, and that is reminiscent of what Christoph Langen used to do in World Championships here.
Yeah, that's a huge lead, but the track is, going to produce times of 1:05, 1:06, so, that time could be made up, but it's going to be very difficult.
Well, in the second heat, they will go 20 down to 1 in reverse order of their performance, so Friedrich will go 20th, and then the remaining sleds from 21st on down to the massive 38th sled in our field will go in the order of their ranking. Tomorrow, in the 3rd and 4th heats, again, anybody who completes the course and wants to go tomorrow will go in heat 3, and then only the fastest 20 will go into heat 4. Lots of runner polishing going on to make sure that friction is reduced to as close to 0 as possible. Air temperature now up to a balmy -9. It'll be gorgeous in the sunshine, but the ice temperature has barely changed even 1 degree since the start of the race, which was at, 8:45. It's now 10:45, 2 hours later, because this ice is so cold overnight.
Yeah, once the sun comes up over the mountains, it's going to shine on that track, and that could cause a difference.
So here we go, 20 down to 1, the fastest 20 in heat 1, starting with Ostas Kibasmanis, one of the fastest starters, the 20-year-old Latvian in the Latvia 2 sled, and Francesco Friedrich will defend his lead, 20th off the top of the mountain. After him, 21 on down, we will see the rest of the sleds compete, and the news that Kevin Kuska is out from behind Thomas Florschutz probably isn't going to put a massive wrinkle in his competitiveness here in the two-man. But of course, for Florschutz, it's not great news, and for Kuska, it's the worst possible news. Certainly to be ruled out of defending a St. Moritz two-man gold medal, which he won with Andre Lange in 2007, and potentially out of being in the 4-man competition as well. Heat 2 of 4 in the Bauhaus FIBT two-man bobsleigh world championships. The fastest 20 start the second heat. The rest of the field will follow. Everybody gets at least 3 trips down in the world championships, as in the Olympic Games. Then the field is cut to the fast 20 to shoot out for the top spots. Ostas Kibasmanis then, this young Latvian, 8th fastest start with a 5:13 in the first heat. And two things, Kurt Tomasevich. First, the start track will be a little quicker. Secondly, the whole track will be a little quicker.
Yep, he improved the start time 5:12, but he couldn't control that great start time and had a little trouble with that first kink already.
Well, he had about as many mistakes as it's possible to have in the first heat. Still a young driver, only in his 3rd season ever of driving a sled. And 2nd season ever of driving a sled, I beg your pardon. And so he is still very inexperienced at feeling what the sled's telling him and, of course, knowledge of this track.
What's a little interesting here is being in 20th, 19th, and 18th position is the sleds could be kind of considered bad luck, because the sleds that are in 21st, 22nd, 23rd position are going off later this afternoon because, or excuse me, later off this morning because they're going to go after the top 20 go. So they're going to get a little bit faster track, and they can actually jump ahead of these sleds that are in 20, 19, and 18th position. So, you know, you always want to improve, of course. You want to be in the best position possible, but just timing is kind of bad luck for these sleds in the top few positions right now.
Well, of course, for us as spectators, that makes it doubly interesting because you're right, the later runners who are out of the 20 should get quicker ice and a chance perhaps to push their way in. Of course, that is a little bit immaterial overnight because we'll still have a 3rd run on Sunday to decide the positions. But Oscar's keepers managed. That was a tidier looking run. 106.66, 2200s quicker. Now, you might normally expect that to be from driving alone, but part of that will be from slightly quicker ice.
Yeah, you can see the sun shining on them just a little bit up there at the top, and even on the track right there. That's going to improve the track times and their down times especially.
And the reason that happens is that as the sled runs over the track, momentarily it melts the surface of the ice and the water lubricates it a little, helps to oil the wheels. And the more the sun helps that, the slicker the track comes. Jan Verber, the Czech Republic, 19th after the first heat, 100th behind Russia's Alexei Stulnev. 5:22 getaway, a fraction slower than their first start. But a little tidier run through corner 2. Now, in the second heat of the women's race, that second kink onto this long straightaway caused no end of dramas. Skidding sled sideways almost through the entire field. But the first couple of sliders seem to have got that under control.
Yeah, the women's race yesterday started at 10 a.m. Now we're at 10:43 a.m. So we're going to see probably a similar reaction where some of these sleds might lose a little bit of control up there toward the top.
Certainly towards the end of the run, you will see sliders having those problems. It'll bump as he comes into telephone. And he's gone behind, so we are going to see some changes because the drivers at this end of the field perhaps not quite as consistent as the front runners.
Yeah, he's falling back pretty quick now. He was 300s ahead at the first 50 meters, now 500s behind. That's going to extend to 700s behind.
A little quicker though, 143.6 to Kibers Manis, 143.2. Could he get right to him? Not quite, but he stops the deficit. So the young Latvian stays in the leader's box. Jan Verber of the Czech Republic slips a spot. Of course, now, at the moment, he doesn't drop out of the top 20 until after Francesco Friedrich, the leader, but then when the remaining sleds come, he might be for the chop.
Yeah, they actually didn't improve their start time. They went from a 5:21 in the first heat to a 5:22 in this second heat. And that might have cost them just that little bit of a difference. The line and horseshoe, not too bad, but hit that entrance and going into telephone curve.
Well, next up is Alexei Stulnev. His wife, Olga Stulneva, is sliding here in the women's race later on this afternoon. He's got the massive Alexei Vojevoda behind him. And as the multiple world champion arm wrestler, you can understand him having big guns, but goodness me, if you were told that he was a power lifter, you would have no question believing that. He's an absolute monster. And again, you know, getting all that speed into the sled is so vital in any start here.
Yeah, but again, just couldn't control that first kink, you know, maybe because the top has changed just a little bit, that causes the drivers to have to take a different approach, and he's, you know, not having a good top at all. Driving all over the place, but still bouncing off the walls.
Well, he pinballed his way down that straight in the first run down to wall. Little tidier this time. And again, you'll see in the track a very matte ice surface. It's still very frosty, but where the runners have been, very shiny, very polished. And that aids the skiddability of the sleds, if you like. It's more likely now to kick out the tail on these little dinks that some of the corners are, and that's a big, hefty hit on the exit of horseshoe.
Yeah, he got his height early in horseshoe, and now he's slipped into the red. Wasn't able to keep that height all the way through Horseshoe and kind of fall and use gravity to slingshot him out when he hit that entrance early.
Yeah, what he did was he accelerated harder into the wall than he might otherwise have done. And the speed isn't there, 143.1. Wow.
Falling back really quickly.
Yeah. Only 104 kilometers an hour. So...
Yeah, he's actually slower this heat than he was the first heat.
Yeah, which is not good under any circumstances. 107.0. Well, now that opens up all sorts of opportunities for those just outside the top 20.
See, he drove very early in the middle of the Horseshoe, and that caused him to kind of catch that second pressure and was sent directly over to that wall right before the telephone corner.
Well, the 25-year-old from Pavlovsk will have a lot of thinking to do overnight. Good first run to build confidence for the French pairing. Loic Costerg and Roman Heinrich, his brakeman. Didn't have the smoothest of loads, the brakeman, so let's see what they can produce. Off two very confidence-inspiring races post-Christmas. This reborn French bobsleigh team is really starting to gain momentum and belief.
Yeah, you can tell that brakeman just had that very similar load, very deliberate, kind of slow load, one shoulder at a time. Wasn't very smooth.
Well, again, like Vojevoda, he is really quite a lot broader than the sled, so trying to squeeze both in together is probably a bit of a fight.
But, you know, Vojevoda can do it, anybody can do it.
And the other thing, of course, as you say, is you don't want to be rocking the sled side to side by wrestling your way in, so he does it very deliberately to be as slow as possible. 500s up on the leaders, Kibers Manis and Zirups of Latvia.
Much better exit, but still hit that lip, or excuse me, hit that wall. Going into the curve they call telephone.
Track probably feeling very different now than it did 2 hours ago when these guys were quite early off in the first heat.
You know, each year when they build this track, you know, they can kind of modify, you know, how they build the track just a little bit. Of course, Horseshoe is pretty permanent there, but, you know, they can change the profile just a little bit. And some years that's going to cause, you know, major catastrophes and crashes every time a sled hits coming out of curve Horseshoe.
Well, the French move into the lead. There are their teammates who'll be racing in the four-man competition as well. And you saw Kibers Manis and Zirups in the leaders box. They will move on. So Loic Costerg and Roman Heinrich, again, a tidy run.
Right here you can tell just the left side of his sled hits that left side of the wall.
You're looking at something, Kurt, that weighs over 700 kilos. To lift that off the ground, you know that's a big impact.
And you know, with all these sleds hitting in the same place, because it's a natural track and there's ice and it's not a concrete wall, we can actually see part of the walls deteriorate and it kind of becomes a hole.
Simone Bertazzo of Italy, the 30-year-old, Carabinieri, with Francesco Costa on the back handles of this sled. Took a bronze medal in the two-man competition in the Worlds in 2007, but from 16th in Heat 1, you've got to say the repetition is unlikely to come here.
Now, what's interesting is I thought more teams are going to improve their start time, but so far only the only team that has improved their start time, or excuse me, 2 of the 5 have improved their start time, but not as much as I would have guessed. I would have thought the track would become a little bit warmer, and that small film of water on top of the track would cause some faster starts. But so far, that's not the case.
Well, overnight low was down below -18, so maybe it is just taking a while. This is the second really cold day we've had, and so the sort of natural chill of the track is perhaps taking a little longer to go away. 107.3, little slower than Loic Costerg. Gaps down to just 600ths from 2/10 at the start. Bertazzo needs to be up to 145 kilometers an hour here.
I think it's going to turn red here pretty quick. Well,
he'll just hold it.
0.06 of a second lead.
Same speed as the French, 0.06 of a second to 0.09. There's Loic on the left, Roma on the right. There are your coaches on the left. Well, just managed to squeeze in front, but that was a slower run than the French sled had in the second heat.
Going into Horseshoe, you could tell Bertazzo had his height a little bit later than the sleds we've seen before. But man, that's so high up there, and he looks like he just missed hitting that lip. But, you know, a number of sleds have actually made contact with that lip.
He was only 0.04 of a second quicker than his first run. The French were 35 hundredths quicker than their first run. Next up, Edwin van Kalker of the Netherlands and Sybren Jansma. Let's see, 5:18 start shows that Edwin was pushing the sled the first time. A hamstring injury that's niggled him since the Whistler race pre-Christmas that he didn't compete in because of the injury is returned. But he gets a 5:16, so feeling that he can lean on that leg now.
Yep. That's really good because, you know, sometimes you have to think your injuries are just something you have to soon forget because you can't dwell on injuries.
The last couple of weeks he's been sitting in the sled or running alongside it rather than adding his weight to it.
Yeah, very interesting. Van Kalker was actually ducking his head as he would make sure the sled was going straight. He would duck his head a little bit just to keep aerodynamics. I'm not sure if he could even see over the cowling when he was ducking his head like that, just assuming that he was pointing in the right direction.
Well, you know what? If it's a good thing at the finish line, it's got to be a good thing on any straightaway, especially at the high speeds we get on this track. 108 kilometers an hour. That's very good speed from Edwin van Kalker.
47 of a second ahead, and he's really flying now. This is looking really good for him.
Well, he had 106.8 and 143.7 as top speeds in the first heat, so he's exceeded those quite considerably. This is a very good run. Will it be down to 106 flat? Wow, almost 106.01, 51 hundredths better. 0.5 of a second. Simone Batanzo, you saw there, only 0.04 of a second better.
Yeah, Van Kalker's, I mean, I can almost promise that he's going to move up at least a couple spots with that kind of run.
Well, he's now in the sort of frame of mind where a top 10 will be about acceptable.
Here he comes out of Nash-Dixon, and he's aiming, trying to find the right line going into Horseshoe. Gets his height and keeps that height. And this is very critical, keeping great speed coming out of Horseshoe. He can slingshot into telephone corner. And Van Kalker does a great job, and he keeps that speed the rest of the course.
Edwin van Kalker leads the field. Hot off the top comes Nick Cunningham of the USA with Dallas Robinson behind him. Dallas running it almost all the way down into turn one, and a good exit off that first little bump.
Same start time that they had in the first heat, 5:16.
Well, the momentum good as well, 56.3, checking all the boxes.
Controlling the sled, doing a pretty good job. See how the sun's shining on the wall corner. Maybe causing the sleds to be a little bit faster than the first heat.
They were 800s up on the Dutch after the first heat, now tied and going behind, coming into Nash and Dixon. The National Guardsman needs 108 kilometers an hour and more if he's to pull himself back into the lead, and he's got it, 108.1.
0.04 of a second behind. Now let's see if he can start to reel in our leader.
Now, critical error in the fast four corners in heat one. If he can undo that mistake, and he has, he gets a clean exit.
He's going to have great speed coming out of here. He's starting to reel in. Van Kalker, 0.03 of a second back.
Oh, just a fraction slower than the Dutch. This is going to be very close at the line. Couple of hundredths in it. 100th of a second in it. And that 100th, you saw Edwin duck his head on a straightaway. That's 100th of a second there.
Yep, that could have been it right there. Wow. You know, I'm sure Nick will be a little disappointed not crossing the line in the lead, but 2 more heats to go. He's got to keep his head up, stay positive. These are those last couple right-hand curves. Maybe comes down just a little hard. You know, I'm not a driver, not positive, but it looked pretty good to me. And great speed, you know, right at the bottom of the track, 145.3 kilometers an hour.
Well, there's Dallas with his back to us is Nick. And next up is Rico Peter of Switzerland with Simon Friedli behind him. 13th place after the first heat. Eric Allard on the left in the white cap. Former gold medal winner for Switzerland as a driver. Just Christmas time appointed as the coach to the Swiss Federation. Interesting hit there. Rico Peter getting to the front handle, it seemed to me, before Simon Friedli was really hefting the back of the sled off the line.
Controls the kink pretty well. A 5:23 start. That's 400 slower than what they did in the first heat.
Well, you know, we're watching footage of the old days from the 30s up to the 80s. They still use that rocking moment to get the sled unstuck from the ice and get the rhythm right. And it seems to me still there are some teams could definitely benefit from that.
Yeah, it's kind of a tradition or a practice that's starting to grow and come back just a little bit. You know, I'm not a huge fan of that just because you're actually having to break more momentum and change the direction of the sled before you actually push it forward.
He has gone 1100s back on our race leader, Edwin van Kalker. You predicted that Edwin would probably move up a handful of spots, and that certainly looks the way at the moment. It's a decent run. 1081 is good speed from Seaman, from Rico Peterada.
He was 1100s back to 800s back. He's starting to reel him in, ducks his head a little bit, 700s back.
Not as quick as the Dutch sled, though. He may not close at the line. Still behind by 400s. What a tight little group. We've got 3 sleds, 400ths of a second, our top 3. Edwin van Kalker, Nick Cunningham, and Rico Peter. So Cunningham has picked off, beg your pardon, van Kalker has picked off 2 so far. And Simone Batazzo has slipped 4 spots. And there you can see the crowd up at the start. There are bleachers there at the finish, at Horseshoe here as well.
Rico Peter really getting the height in Horseshoe. Yeah, just misses that. I mean, you're 10, 12 feet up in the air, and you just kind of have a free fall coming out of the exit of Horseshoe trying to control that sled. It's not an easy thing to do.
Next up is Canada's Justin Cripps, a man from Hawaii. Now lives in Summerland, British Columbia. Eurotech sled. Former brakeman. Started driving just 2010. World Cup rookie last season. Oh, little skid into the first corner, but actually handles it well.
Yeah, that might have actually set them up very well to handle the kink.
Another good start from them. 5:13 in the first heat, was the 8th fastest starter. It's good stuff from him and Neville Wright.
5:13 again this heat, but you know, that velocity, I think there was the potential for them to really have a hard time, but Justin was able to control the sled and came out of that kink in a very good position, actually.
They had better first corner velocity than anyone we've seen so far, and he is still just a 10th in front of Van Kalker, but it was nearly 2 tenths at the start. Exit here will be vital, and that is very smooth. 800s, but he'll build on that. 1077. Will he come back?
One other thing is these drivers are coming through these curves toward the bottom part of the track, and as the sun's coming up, you can see the trees causing some shadows in there, so they're going in and out of the sunlight. And it's kind of a difficult thing to do. Down to 300ths of a second ahead.
Little slower than the Dutch. This could be a dead heat at the line. Very close indeed. 400s. He just found it in those last couple of corners. So the speed down the straightaway towards Martineau tells us something, but how they drive Martineau and then crossing the crest to run uphill into Portago, that decides how you get to the line. Neville Wright wants to know the start time. 13, dude. Good start from those 2 guys.
Yep, the last couple right-hand curves as he's coming down into the speed trap. Not awesome speed, you know, he's behind Rico Peter, Nick Cunningham, and Van Kalker, but still able to keep the lead.
Oh, such tiny gaps here. Alexander Kazyanov of Russia was just 100th of a second in front of Justin Cripps in the first heat for 11th rather than 12th spot. Max Belugin behind him. Kazyanov still just 25 years old. He and Alexei Stulnev are really the future of Russia once Zubkov retires after Sochi, as surely he must. 5:19 start, so they found 100th in there somewhere.
56 kilometers an hour start velocity.
A little slower than Justin Cripps at 56.4. Slower too than Van Kalker and Cunningham. And he's behind the leaders already by 500s. 1500s, dropping speed.
Back pretty quick.
Little skids through Nash and Dixon. Oh, and hits the woodwork hard in Horseshoe.
Yep, that caused him to kind of take that second pressure in Horseshoe, but still only 1500ths of a second back. But I think the way he drove Horseshoe, he's gonna fall back even farther.
And you can see the tail of the sled starting to break away in some of the corners. Perversely, you might think as a car racer it would start to move up the hill. No, it starts to slide back down the hill. 144.2, that's respectable, but in this company it's not going to get him anywhere near where he wants to be. Slops 5, slips 5. That's Pierre Ludas not smiling there.
Yeah, it's surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to be, Kazyanov's a little disappointed in this. You know, a couple mistakes toward the top of the track. And loading out of the sled at the bottom of the track, just nothing seemed to be going right for him there.
Yeah. A little left coming into Horseshoe, as a result gets high late.
Yep, you can see, maybe he did just take a tap. You can see the snow flying just a little bit there.
Alexander leaves the sled post-haste as Lyndon Rush is next up now. He and Jesse Lumsden, I think, have got to be disappointed with only 10th place after the first heat. Started 10th fastest with a 5:14. Okay, that's the bad run. Now let's get 3 real stormers to get our 2-man World Cup points leader back into contention.
Yeah, if they push to their potential, I can see them pushing about a 5:10, 5:12 right here. 5:14, I think they might have been just a little disappointed with that. I know they can improve it.
But it's a 5:19. That means that Lyndon Rush now has to find lots in the driving to overhaul who? His own teammate Justin Cripps. There was only 0.04 of a second between them in the first heat to Lyndon's advantage. So this was an enormously tight little group of sleds, and we said we were going to see a lot of changes around. He was 400s up in heat 1, he's 400s back in heat 2.
Yeah, Lyndon's a great driver, though. Just barely looking over the front of that sled. Drives horseshoe very well. 100th behind right now, and I think he's going to pass up Cripps here in the next split.
Yeah, top speed, 108.3.
Yep.
Cripps only had 107.7. In the lead for the first time on this run.
So here's where the Eurotech sled's really going to take off.
Well, Cripps had 144.9, 145.5 for Lyndon Rush, and that's from that slingshot effect out of horseshoe all the way down to the bottom of the track. He's riding it down nearly, just over, doubles his advantage. 106.07. Justin Cripps and Neville Wright wave goodbye from the leader's box there. Teammates take over. So all 3 Canadian sleds in the top 10, and in a field of 38, where you've got 3 Germans, 3 Americans to start with, that's not bad going.
Yeah, you can tell this is where the fast part of the track comes, and this is where Lyndon really took off in his Eurotech sled, just behind Rico Peter. And Lyndon was really able to jump up ahead of Cripps right here.
So the man who may well end up with our Crystal Globe as the 2-man World Cup champion is the leader as Max Arndt comes to line with Marco Hubenbecker behind him. Started 5:22, only 19th fastest up. Hubie will be kicking himself if he can't improve on that.
Yeah, but one thing in the first heat was that Max Arndt was off very early. He was the 12th sled off the hill. They had that as a disadvantage, so they moved up a number of spots just in that first heat, so I think they're going to make a number of jumps here as well.
5:19, but only 55.9 kilometers an hour to 56.2 or 56.4 of Justin Cripps and Neville Wright. So 10th up.
Yeah, this will be interesting to see where he can finish in the second heat. Little tap there going into Sunny.
Well, you're right, he had a really disadvantageous start draw, 12th compared to Lyndon Rush, 37th of 38 sleds, so the ice was much faster for Rush. Can Arndt drive himself perhaps closer to the top half dozen? Only 900s up, 108.5 is quicker than Rush, quicker than we've seen so far. And that is quicker than the first heat.
1300ths of a second now ahead. Starting to pull away from Rush. Great lines at the bottom of this track. 146 kilometers an hour.
Wow. And that's a good run, 105.99. Now, where would that have left him in the first heat? That would have left him in 3rd place. So that is a very strong run from Max Arndt.
Yeah, that's what I would expect. Very high in horseshoe, controls the exit.
Max Arndt to Germany is our race leader. There he is. He's ahead of Lyndon Rush and Justin Cripps of Canada, with our fast 8 still to come. Corey Butner of the USA and Chris Fogue behind him. Corey, great first trip down the track to sit 8th in the World Championships, 2nd of our US sleds, and that's a really inspiring first run for him. It was neat, it was precise, it was quick.
In order for Corey to really become competitive in this race, he's got to have a top 10 start. Their rank in the first heat was 14th with a 5:19. They need to drop that start time.
Well, they get down to 5:17, so every 100th is an improvement. And where he is in this tight little battle, 100th ahead of Max Arndt from the first heat, 200s in the start is solid gold.
56.2 coming out of that first kick. That's pretty good start velocity.
Quicker than Arndt, who was only 55.9, but Arndt, from horseshoe down, was out-accelerating everybody. 700.
Extend, yep, to 700ths of a second. See how he drives Nash Dixon, where he might have had a couple mistakes in the first heat. Into horseshoe.
Nice lines. Great exit as well. See what the first trick gives him in confidence. 107.8. It's a kilometre an hour, nearly slower than Max Arndt, so the gap will come down.
Yeah, it's going to come down kind of quick from 11 to 7.
Closer
a lot of track left.
Closer he gets to 146 clicks at the bottom, the better. 145.7, 90.6 miles an hour. That might just be enough to keep Cody Butler in the lead, Corey Butler in the lead, and it is 300ths of a second.
Yeah, that's got to be optimistic. Looking into tomorrow to still be ahead of one of the Germans, you know, that's a good thing for Corey.
And again, shows that despite the, 11 years vintage of the Bodine sled, it's within a whisker of the latest FES kit in terms of outright top speed.
Yeah, Corey really drove well coming out of horseshoe. It's a telephone corner. Can't see that sled skidding around in the back very much, so that means the back end of the sled is following the runners of the front end of the sled. That's exactly what you want.
Confidence and feel are so vital, and Corey has got that after 2 good trips. He leads with 7 fastest sleds, and then the rest of the field still to come. However, wherever it is that you're watching us, whatever hour of the day and night, welcome to our coverage live from beautiful St. Moritz. I'm Martin Haven. Sitting alongside me is Kurt Tomasevich. And at the line is Thomas Florschutz with the replacement Andy Bredau on the back handles. Kevin Kuska pulled a hamstring in the first heat. Andreas Bredau having, 20 minutes to warm up and get ready for the race. A 5:09 start for the first heat is a 5:15. And this is a really tough place for a brakeman to be dropped into. It can't have been more than 20 minutes that he had to prepare for the race.
Yeah, that makes it very difficult. You know, you mentally prepare for a race, you know, usually the day before, the night before, and, you know, Alex Bordeaux just didn't have that kind of preparation. You know, he might have known that he was the spare, but, you know, you just don't have that same mental preparation. But, you know, not a bad start time. You know, he was 600ths behind what Kevin Kuske pushed, but, you know, that should be enough to keep Florschutz in the mix, because Florschutz is a fantastic driver. He's got great equipment. 1200ths of a second ahead right now.
Wow, 109 kilometers an hour for Thomas Florschutz, the fastest we've seen from any sled. Now he's trying to put the problems of Kevin Kuska behind him and really motor on. Into the 146s surely for the FES sled. Big skid, 145.6, and that'll rob some of that towards the line. He will have the lead, but by how much? A 10th, 1600ths of a second.
Yeah, so we're...
Yeah, you can kind of hear Corey and Chris talk about some of the optimistic things that they can point out. You know, Florschutz had a great bottom, and Corey found a couple mistakes where he can improve for tomorrow. So, you know, there is a chance where Corey could catch Florschutz.
Well, good stand-up job by Andy Bredau to take over from Kevin Kuska, and he gets out without clutching his left hamstring, which is very good news.
Coming out of the last right-hand curve, you can see this is where he had a little bit of a mistake, but, you know, he had such great speed, and this is so close to the finish line, it might not have made a huge difference.
Is that enough to put Thomas Florschutz in the top 6 after Heat 2? We'll have to wait and see what this man can do. Oskars Melbardis was in 6th place. The Latvian with Daumas Driskins behind him, and not the fastest starter in the first heat, so still got to see that arrive. Still just 23 years old. Former brakeman for Yannis Minins.
5:08 start time in the first heat. It's hard to say, but it's a disappointing start for them.
Handle is out. Driver's got to get the sled
5:07.
straight.
They improved it a little bit, but yeah, you know, just problems just seem to add up for these guys. Couldn't get that push bar down.
Now you notice there that it wasn't the driver that put the push bar in. You saw the brakeman sit up, see it was still out, and then he re-clicked the lever. Some sleds the driver does it, some sleds the brakeman does.
You're correct, yep. You know, sometimes that is up to the brakeman, and sometimes they have to time it right, because if you're in the middle of that curve, that momentum of the push bar collapsing could send the sled into a skid. So maybe he did intend to wait until after the first kick to do that.
The only problem is he had to tuck his head out to see that it was still up, and now the Latvians have gone behind Florschutz. 107.2 to Florschutz is 109 kilometers an hour.
How much speed? Yeah, he's probably going to fall behind Corey and maybe Arndt as well.
Yeah. Florschutz is definitely back in the mix, but what about the Latvians? They just don't seem to have the speed that they had in the first heat. Not even as quick as their first run. 106.08. It was 106.15, so a faster slide, but the top speeds were not there.
And this is definitely a track where Oskars Melbardis can't take advantage of his strengths. His strength is in the start, and this track takes a lot of driving, and he just couldn't keep up with some of the sleds we've seen so far.
A little tap, vital to get the line right into Horseshoe. He was just kicked offline a little. And although there's no crash, it means perhaps he's steering a little harder, more steering, more friction. Next up, one of the dark horses that Kurt Tomaszewicz pointed to for the first heat, and he certainly lived up to that billing. Chris Spring of Canada, the former Aussie, born in Darwin in the Northern Territory. For Crocodile Dundee fans, you know where that is. And he's got King, Lascelles Brown, ex-Jamaican, ex-Canadian, ex-Monegasque, Canadian brakeman. Are you keeping up with me, children? 5:12 first getaway, 5th fastest start. You know King wants to get that down to a 10 at least.
That was the key to their first run and keeping Spring in the mix. Now a 5:11. They have 0.08 of a second ahead right now.
And 56.5, very good momentum as well.
Doing a good job keeping the sled straight through the first kinks and into wall. Now that lead is probably going to extend from 0.08 of a second to 0.12 of a second. So now he needs to keep that velocity. This is the tricky part coming through. Nash Dixon.
Well, he was only 0.04 up on Thomas Florschutz, our current leader from the first heat. 0.04 of a second. That is less than the fastest you can possibly blink your eye. And look at this, 108.2. Florschutz had 109. So we'll see when he gets out in his fast four, out of Tree, out of Bridge, out of Leap and Gunter Sachs. What's he got on this short straight?
Yeah,
He's 145.5. He's got 145.2. It's going to be very close at the line.
Could even be a dead heat tie right here.
Could be from 400s to 700s. Drove the last two corners really well. Well, that was that skid that Florschutz had after the speed trap. Robbed him of a few vital hundreds. Chris Spring, guaranteed top 5 position, going to bed after the first night of the World Championships.
Yeah, good call. That one little skid by Florschutz where Chris Spring handles it very smoothly. This is where Florschutz had that skid.
Well, the speed not as great as Florschutz, but he didn't give any away after that. Mean holding on to it. Wow. Chris Spring. Yeah. Sat out the end of last season after a big crash in Altenburg with his 4-man crew. What a difference 12 months makes. Ditto for Stephen Holcomb, the USA. Tied for 3rd spot here. Not too bad, but 4,700s back from the leader. Not too good. What can he and Stephen Langton do in this new BMW sled?
Spring, Holcomb, and Zubkov all pushed a 5:12 in the first heat. Spring was able to improve his start time by 100th. Langton pushes Holcomb to a 5:12 once again, so this is going to be very close. 56.6 start velocity.
Well, this is where the 2-man and 4-man reigning world champion has to find a sprinkle of magic dust. Had a little weave down the straight towards wall, nothing major.
Seems very smooth, 0.03 of a second ahead.
He was 700s up on Chris Spring of the first heat. Low line through Horseshoe, but gets a great exit, nails it now. 108.1, that's good speed. Is he going to get back into the lead, though? Spring, 108.2 and 145.2. Holcomb is driving back.
This is what you would expect out of that brand new sled. Great aerodynamics. This is where the sleds are going close to 90 miles per hour. 0.05 of a second ahead, 146.1 speed.
Great speed from the BMW sled, 90.8 miles an hour, takes the lead with a 105.81. Now our first round leader did a 105.59, Hefty in second, a 105.79. So Holcomb is close to those. Question is, what extra can they find from the track?
Yeah, this is going to put a little pressure on Zubkov. You watch Holcomb take this run, and they were tied after the first heat. Holcomb made one little mistake right here. The sled just decided to take off on him, but controlled it really quickly. That was a really good job.
Looks like it was just finding some tracks to follow on its own. Great exit here, and that's the key, so smooth out of the horseshoe. Stephen Holcomb, the defending world champion, leads the two-man race from Chris Spring and Thomas Florschutz. Third, tied with Stephen Holcomb, one of his career-long rivals, you'd have to say, Alexander Zubkov, with Dmitry Cherenkov on the back of the veteran Russian sled. A successful luger in his time as a youth, then transferred to bobsleigh. And of course, for Zubkov, like for the Canadians 4 years ago, the massive target of a home Winter Games. Looking down into this Valna sled at the D-rings, the metal handles that control the steering ropes, or in some cases the wires that are used on the front axle to control these sleds.
Once again, a 5:12 in the first heat. And they really improved to a 5:09.
Wow, that's a great effort, and Cherenkov, you know, will be trying to respond to the challenge a bit hefty, and Francesco Friedrich in front of him, who were joint fast starters on 5:05.
Yeah, it looked like the sled took off on him just a little bit, just like it did for Steve Holcomb. So, you know, that advantage that he might have had where he thought Holcomb might have made a mistake was wiped out.
Already see not just the fans packing the track, but some of the women's competitors already on the side walls watching the action. Alexander Zubkov, 600ths up. Don't forget, tied to the 100th of a second with Stephen Holcomb, the defending world champion. 1:08, slower than Holcomb by 1/10 of a kilometre an hour.
Yeah, again, this is where the BMW sled of Stephen Holcomb really took off. Zubkov's lead now only 500ths of a second. He's starting to lose that lead. This is going to be really close.
Holke, 1:46.1. Zubkov, 1:45.2.
Tied right now, dead even.
He's going to go behind. He was nearly a full kilometre an hour behind, and it's 300ths of a second. Yeah, well, 300ths, again, less than the blink of an eye, the beat of a hummingbird's wing. And not seeing the number one coming in, Zubkov shakes his head a fraction, but they are so tight.
The optimistic thing about this is that Holcomb has been in fourth place. We finished in fourth place, I don't know how many times, in two-man and four-man here in St. Moritz, so he knows at least today he's going to be in at least third place going into the second heat.
Take that away and be glad of it. The question is, what will our top two do? Because they were a long way in front. Bert Hefty, 2700ths of a second in front of Stephen Holcomb and Alexander Zubkov. He was second, they were tied for third. And that seems like a big margin after one heat of a four-heat race. You're right, it is a big margin. The Swiss champion in two-man set a start record then of 5:00 seconds. December 29th, 2012. Let's see if he can get close to that in this second start.
It's always fun to hear the hometown crowd cheer for their favorite country. 5:05 in the first heat, 5:03 in the second heat.
Getting precious close to that, 5:03 start. And 56.9 kilometers an hour. We haven't seen that momentum from anybody apart from our race leader, Francesco Friedrich.
Hefty's in a very fortunate position. He's well ahead of third place, 2700ths of a second, and he's looking forward to trying to catch Friedrich. You know, he doesn't have that pressure of somebody breathing down his neck, so he can just look forward and try to move up into first place. 2700ths from the first heat. He'll have doubled that by the time he comes out of horseshoe unless he uses his helmet. 4400ths, well, he was 47 up at Sunny, 1:08.1, same as Holke, so he's not going to lose any more of that lead. Little rocky there from tree to bridge. Got to tidy these last corners up, out of Sachs, arrow straight, tucks his head, 1:45.9, just a whisker slower than the BMW sled. Can he hold on to a half-second lead? No, 1:05.66. Well, that's quicker than he went by 1300ths of a second in the first heat. Holcomb, though, found very nearly 2/10ths of a second. Yep, so, you know, he is putting a little bit of pressure on him. In fact, Holcomb found more than that. He found 2500, so he's reduced some of that margin, halved it pretty much. Hasn't he? He's almost doubled it, hasn't he? Hefty. Massive margin. Great lines coming through horseshoe again. You know, Hefty's been down this track so many times. He knows the perfect line coming through there. Thomas Lamparter looks happy with that, as you might imagine. And now the fastest sled in the first heat. Equal fastest start for Francesco Friedrich and Janis Becker.
Friedrich, the junior world champion in 2-man and 4-man, last year's Europa Cup champion, won every one of the 2-man races as well. And he was fastest all the way down this track by some margin.
I won't say it was a surprise, but it was a very impressive start time. 5:05 in the first heat, 5:04 in the second heat, but he did climb that wall a little bit in kink, so I don't know if he's going to have that same kind of velocity as he comes out of kink 2 and into wall.
56.7 for him, 56.9 for Hefty, but he was 0.2 of a second up. We're not talking hundreds, we're talking big margins. Well, as you said in the first heat, the scariest thing about this kid is not how well he starts and how athletic he is and how well he drives, but the fact that he's just 22 and he's only been doing it for 2 or 3 years.
His lead is slowly dissipating from 1900s to 1100s, but now back up to 1700s.
109.2 kilometers an hour, 68 miles an hour. That is sensational.
Yeah, this lead is going to be 4/10 by the time he crosses this finish line. He's really driving well.
He is Christoph Langen reincarnated. 146.6, comfortably quicker than anybody else. And you're right, it's a massive lead, 105.51. Jawohl, says Christoph Langen, and that was the German, I'm sure, for get in there. Wow, big run for Francesco Friedrich. He's going to go to bed nursing the better part of a half-second lead, 35 hundredths of a second up. Well.
Pretty big smile today, but there's 2 more heats to go. You know, he's got to sleep on it, think about it. That can be good or bad.
Well, he also knows this is his chance because he's not going to be racing in the 4-man. At least we believe he's not going to be racing in the 4-man. So the 2-man gold is his target, and boy, he's already arm wrestling everybody pretty successfully for this. Quick start, only just outstarted by Bernd Hefty to keep the Swiss in contention. But Friedrich driving up a storm here in St. Moritz. Wow. Christoph Langen, Andre Lange. Is this the next of the super Germans that will dominate the sport for a decade? At the moment, he is comfortably ahead, and look at those gaps, first to second and then second to third. Holcomb just in front of Zubkov, Chris Spring, Florschutz, Corey Butner, Max Arndt and the rest, very close indeed. But the top 3 spread out so wide here, and this track normally doesn't do that in races. Well, those are the fast 20. We'll hear from them, hopefully, and then we will get 21 down to 38, our sleds still to continue. Busy times down there at the Horseshoe Bar. See the brand new grandstands in the background, and here up at the top, it's sun's out, guns out time. Basting themselves, basking in the sunshine there. See lots of fans, Panamanian flags there in the middle, and all sorts of different team jackets, Swiss, Austrians, Brits, Aussies. Lots of fans down around this trackside. And one of the great things, Kurt Tomasevich, about this St. Moritz track is that it is right on the edge of town, and the town has almost grown around it. It's been, you know, more than 100-year-old part of its heritage.
Yeah, it's definitely great. You know, you see an elderly woman behind the counter. In a small town like St. Moritz, Switzerland, when the local crowd comes out, it's always great to see them support not just the Swiss team, but all the crowds in the countries as well.
Well, let's get down to John Morgan in the finish area and hear from our leaders.
Okay, I'm with Team Steve Holcomb. Steve, pretty good run the second trip. You were really flying on the bottom.
Yeah, you know, I had 2 pretty good runs. The new BMW sled's pretty fast. I'm pretty happy with that. 2 great pushes with Langton, and we keep it going for tomorrow. It's the first time in my career I have not finished 4th here. I finished better than 4th, so I'm happy to be moving up. So,
congratulations. Sleep well tonight in St. Moritz, and over to second place, Team Bernd Hefty. You happy with both runs?
Ja, ich bin zufrieden mit beiden Läufen am Start bis ins Ziel. Morgen nochmals so und dann sind wir zufrieden.
Yeah, he's not happy with the starts, not so happy with everything that would happen, but silver medal so far. Good luck, and Team Friedrich. Wow, are you surprised?
A little bit. In training, all was very close, and today we make 2 good runs, 2 good starts, and so we can stand here.
Well, have a good night's sleep tonight. Good luck.
On the right-hand side there, Janis Becker, part of that super starting lineup, but Francesco Friedrich, You know, you could give me Janis Becker's start. I couldn't handle it. Friedrich can. Well, next up on the ice, we go from 21 to 38. Everybody else gets a second and a third trip here before the field is trimmed to 20. Now, of course, the 20th starter went first in this heat, and here we are getting on for an hour later, 45 minutes later, certainly, as the 21st place sled, Monaco, Patrice Sevelle and Elie Lefort get their turn. Will be more polished, it'll be faster, it'll be slicker though, and there is more chance that the sled will break away in ways that it didn't in the first heat, so the drivers have to be aware of that. Handel is out, he gets it in now, off a 5:33 start, a couple of hundreds quicker than his first run. Now he is not trying to catch our race leader, Francesco Friedrich. Little weave there as he comes down towards wall. Target for him will be Alexei Stulnev in 20th place. Well, Stulnev, the Russian, was 1.29 seconds off the lead after the first heat. Patrice Sevelle was 1.3, so there was little between them. And Sevelle, at the moment, has not managed to catch the Russian. 107.0. Not sure that's even as quick as he managed in the first heat. Again, a little wayward in the fast four corners, double tap on the wall, takes speed out of the sled. He's not going to get into the top 20. 20th place it is, 106.90, so he does just overhaul Alexei Stulnev. And he will have to hope that he can stay in the top 20 overnight. Nobody else goes quicker than him, and that's a little bit of a wayward run. This is Martineau to Portago. That little wooden bit there is where they build the bridge over the crest to run. He hits that on the inside. Big skid through Portago, throws him into the outside wall. Could hardly have gone worse. You see the crew having to push the sled up, what the bobsledders call the walk of shame. Well, next up is John Jackson of Great Britain with 100-metre specialist Craig Pickering behind him. Craig in only his third weekend of bobsledding in his life. John Jackson, the Royal Marine Commando.
Everything now, come on! You know that!
And for all of these teams now, getting into the top 20 overnight makes a big difference mentally, if not actually realistically. Just means you've got less stress for the following day. Well, 5:26 in the first heat, 20th fast start. Craig running it down into the first corner, jumps into the back of the Hilty sled. Hans Hildebrand's kit is usually pretty quick, 5:24, they found a couple of hundreds. That's nearly a tenth faster than Patrice Sevelle of Monaco. That gives Jacko a great opportunity to get into the top 20. He was 1700s behind the Monaco sled. He's up from 22nd to 21st place. He's already overhauled he's already overhauled Patrice Sevelle, who is 21st. Alexei Stulnev in 20th place is the target. You see some snow dropping out of the trees, not too much of a problem. 107.4 for John Jackson of Great Britain. 20th place at the moment, so he's found himself into the top 20. 107.5, what has he got down at the bottom? 144 is not great speed. Will he stay in the top 20 at the line? Yes, he does. A 106.58 slide is enough to keep him in 20th place. 18th fastest of this heat. Sometimes makes a little confusing reading when you're staring at it intently, wanting it to say what you want it to say, as the coaches were there. Well, now we've seen the track progressively getting quicker during the day, and so it is for Jackson here at Horseshoe. Nice late exit. Does he drive it smoothly down? Yes, he does. Good job. That's a much better second run from the GB1 crew. Well, next up, Dorin Grigore of Romania. Started 11th when the ice was really at its coldest. 23rd spot. 500 slower than Team Great Britain. Let's see what Dorin Grigore can produce here. 28-year-old from Bucharest. And his brakeman running it right down into the first corner, Florian Kratzuin. 5:29 getaway, a whisker quicker than their 5:30 in the first heat. Gets out of the second kink without too many dramas. 23rd at the start for the Romanians. Of course, every sled that comes now will be a little further behind 20th spot. The magic of 20th place is that is where the guillotine falls after heat 3 tomorrow, and only the fast 20 go through into the final heat, and he did that in the first heat, hit the woodwork, but he did it harder in the second heat and just survived that one. It's where he crashed in the final run of training. 104.9, wiped all that speed off with such a big impact on the wall. Down at the bottom, he'll be in 141s maybe, 142.9, recovered his composure nicely. This is going to leave him in 23rd place. In fact, that is slower than his first heat. And the hit in the roof of Horseshoe not only puts the fear of God into the brakeman because he's worried that they're going to come down upside down, but it takes speed out of the sled. And this is a big hit as well. Again, like heat 1, hits with the front and the back of the sled there, and just whiskers away with the back bunks. That means a very uncomfortable landing. That's what it does to the paintwork as well. Well, they survived without a crash. They are in 23rd place as Dawid Kupczyk of Poland comes up next. First of our 2 Polish competitors. 33-year-old veteran, Marcin Navarra behind him. And again, these guys are over 0.3 of a second away from the top 20, and a skid out of corner 1. 5:28, a much better getaway than their 5:34 in the first heat. And Kupczyk sitting very, very low in the sled, right behind the peak on the brow of that Singer. Keep his head right out of the way. Well, I'm Martin Haven, watching live trackside here at St. Moritz. John Morgan alongside me. And John, the track getting quicker and quicker, but the further you are out of the top 20, the bigger a mountain you've still got to climb.
Well, they should still take advantage of their later starter time. You can see the sun coming out, and they could move themselves up a couple positions with a good run, especially if they had a bad first run.
And good speed, 107.3. Started 24th. He's now overhauled Dorin Grigori of Romania for 23rd spot.
Yeah, he should be up in the top 20 with the experience that Kupczyk has got on this track. He's been sliding here for over a decade. 21st time of the run, 106.90.
Well, that leaves him in 23rd place, so he has overhauled the Romanians, but he's still 3 spots away from making the final heat, so that'll be his overnight target.
0.3 faster than his first run time. That's reflective. You're going to see a lot of sleds go faster. And again, especially if they had a bad first run.
Michael Cerizet of Belgium with Lino van Dorn behind him, one of the earliest starters, 8th place in the first run start draw when the track was at its coldest, frostiest and stickiest for the runners.
The only natural ice track left that we compete on the World Cup circuit. Ooh, that's a bad skid. There's a natural ice track in Sapporo. Of course, it was used for the 72 Winter Olympic Games, and they say they rebuild that every once in a while for, 800 meters, half of it or so, passenger rides. This is a special place, especially when you see it as cold as it is, and then it's going to get warm. And the ice still maintains these perfect racing conditions.
Well, John, the taxi driver on the way down this morning told me that the overnight low tonight into tomorrow is due to get down from -18 as it was today to -26. So we're going to have a very fast track tomorrow.
Kudos to our TV crew, the cameraman, everybody out there in these conditions.
Yeah, they are wrapped up like Nanook of the North.
They're still providing awesome pictures. What a spectacular place to broadcast this sport.
107.40 in the first heat. That's a much better run from the Belgians. 107.03. Now, it doesn't move them up a spot, but he has found a lot of pace. Still a lot more mistakes that he needs to tidy up, though.
He had a lot of places where he just hit everything in sight. Look at the grooves. Looks like those runners are sitting down in that groove a little bit more. It might make things a little stickier. Watch this. Bang. Bang. You know, you're going 85 miles an hour, 88 miles an hour. You don't want to be doing that even at that speed. Those were 2 hard hits.
Noise to the top from the GB athletes for the second of our Great Britain sleds. Lamin Dean, the Grenadier Guardsman, and Ben Simons behind him, his brakeman. Joined the World Cup team midway through the season. He was an army boxer, Lamin, before he took to bobsleigh, played soccer too, and started as a brakeman, driving now for 3 years.
Ben's got some very good technique here as he loads in the back of the sled. There's a drift. Now he doesn't try and steer away. Now look for the runner tips here. A lot of guys we've seen ducking their head in here.
Yep.
I mean, you got to have a lot of confidence to do that, but any way to pick up a couple hundredths, 100th of a second. I mean, there are some athletes in the top 20 that are separated by 100th of a second after 2.5 miles down the track.
Well, he's moved from 26th ahead of the Belgians to 25th place at the moment. He's nearly 6/10 away from a top 20 berth. But if he can find half of that this afternoon and half of that tomorrow, he would be a very happy bunny. Little skiddy and skatey down here. 106.7, it's not great speed.
Start time wasn't that good. 21st best start out of 26 sleds. Those are good lines. 143.5 speed.
Quicker than the Belgians that they're trying to stay in front of.
Hang in there.
Can't get up to it. 23rd fastest run, but he closes the gap to the Belgians. Less than a tenth. Lee Johnson on the left, Pete Gunn on the right, the British coaches. Last time the World Championships were here, Lee Johnson was driving GB1, John Jackson in GB2.
Yeah, Lee Johnson finished 5th in the 4-man at that event.
He said if the boys get in the top 10, he's going to produce the famous backflip again.
He said 6, so I think that might be outside that window, but good lines here, you know. Dean's first World Championships, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. Certainly in the front
seat. For a while. Good athlete.
Well, next up is Maciej Luty of Poland, 27th of our 38 sleds after the first of 4 heats here. And again, like the Belgian Mikael Cerizet, early starter, 7th off the hill.
Yeah, but he also had the 31st best start. That's pretty negligible in this sport. You can't have a start time that is so far away.
5:33, the fastest start was a 5:03 from Bernd Hefty, who was 2.1 seconds in front of Maciej Luty after the first heat. Francesco Friedrich of Germany is our race leader by over 35 of a second from Bernd Hefty.
Strange format here in St. Moritz. Unlike the World Cup, which is a 3-seed draw, where the top 10 sleds in the World Cup are the first seed, they draw names out of a hat who goes first through 10. Here, your World Cup ranking allows you to determine any start number you want. Well, on every other refrigerated track on the planet, you want to start first. But here in this natural track, you want to start last in the first run, which is what we saw Friedrich do. He's the World Cup leader. He drew last. He took the number 38 position, and you know what? He's our leader after 2 heats so far.
Maciej Luty, 107.06. John, 63 of a second better than his first run. So you've got to look at that being a big improvement from the driver.
And probably every one of these guys coming down now, it's their personal best on this track. They haven't gone this fast during the week.
Well, conditions were different. The last day of training was like this. The previous 2 days were fairly sticky. There's that exit out of Horseshoe. Well, Maciej still very young, 23 years old, so lots of future for him. Next up, Aussie Heath Spence with Luki Stigmata on the back of the Australian sled. Heath, the Aussie, originally from Melbourne, now lives in Calgary, Alberta, and runs a taxi bobsleigh program there during the winter and the summer.
He said he did about 400, 500 runs in the summer. He says a little bit around the Calgary Stampede. He said he did about 100 rides over about a 3-day period. He said he was a little beat up.
Yeah, that's going to rattle the old brain a bit, I think.
He said he had a few washboard stomach.
Yeah, ripples on the stomach, ripples in the brain. Let's look at the kind of speeds that we're going to get from Heath Spence here. Skiddy.
Steering looked like there.
107.8, that's decent speed.
Yeah, so better line than he had in his first run. First run, he had a there. As soon as I said that, there's the commentator Jinx. He got a little sideways down. We're going 85 miles an hour, 145 clicks. Look at his 142 clicks.
Well, even with those skids, still quicker than the first heat.
Could have dropped though.
And 107.10, well, his first run was a 107.73, so over 0.6 of a second quicker.
0.6. Now he's only within 30 hundredths or so, 35 hundredths of moving up 3 or 4 spots. So a good day tomorrow, he could move up, but this mistakes here down at the bottom. Not so much here. That's not going to hurt you. All the back ends out too. Here's in the finish. This is a hard hit. Before the eye.
Well, his first run, John, was at about 9:15 this morning. It's now 11:45. He gets a second chip down the track. It'll be a totally different beast. And that'll be the case for a lot of these late starters now in the second heat. Vuk Radjenovic of Serbia was the 4th man out of the start blocks this morning with Damian Zatnar. So this will be a totally different driving experience for him as well.
Oh.
Again, faster start from 5:31 to 5:27 in the second heat.
This is where you see the guys trying to get their heads down as far as they can. Eyes barely over the cowling. Aerodynamic efficiency.
He's really looking forward to next week's 4-man race after an 11th place finish, just a whisker out of the top 10 last time out in Evers, Austria.
Pivotal part of track. Much better than the first run. A lot of sleds hit that wall from Horseshoe over to Telephone.
He only had 105 kilometers an hour speed in the first heat, 107.5 now. Down the bottom, he had 140.9. Good exit here, should see him up into the 143s. Little wavy, 143.1.
107.76 in the first run.
Down just about 106.
Almost a full
Almost a second. 9/10. Way to go.
He moved up 2 places.
Well, that's a really good second run from Vuk Radjenovic.
Start. Big guys in. Not real totally smooth. Look at the rudder tips here. Too much energy into that first curve. And recovered well, but a lot of energy, a lot of momentum. Got taken away here in the Horseshoe. Watch the diagonal crossover onto the take-on to Telephone. Take-on is where you get on the curve. Outlets where you get off the curve.
Michael Klingner of Liechtenstein started in 19th in the first heat draw. 5:36 getaway with brakeman Bruno Meyerhans. Again, top of the track is less frosty, just going a little faster now.
Good lines here. Oh, there's the Jinx again.
Hey, you've got that nailed.
Yeah. I say good.
Well, we saw yesterday in the women's race in the second heat, that second kick rather than first one, really kicking sled sideways. Because, John, it's not a flat corner. There is a little bump on the outside, almost a corner. Really skids you around.
Precision steering can be perfect in areas. Well, anybody in the top 5.
This is looking like a better run. 104.7 first heat, 107.1 in the second. Again, he's going to be on for a second quicker. 140.9 at the bottom of the track in heat 1. 142.3. He's yet to start more than a couple of World Cup races, but this is second World Championships in 12 months, Michael Klingner.
Yeah, he just went 7,500s or so better.
107.09. Drops a couple of tenths further back behind Vukrat Jenovic, though. He moves up. No, he doesn't move up, in fact, he gets closer to Heath Spence of Australia. So 30 sleds down. A couple of worrying moments, particularly from the Romanians, but everybody's safe.
Here's the skids. Oh, up there where the speeds are slow, you cannot make mistakes. Look at the line, left side of horseshoe. And now he has to steer a lot. You could tell that the way the two helmets separated. That was the G-force right at the pressure point. When you go in there and have to steer like that, that causes a lot of extra movement, friction.
Slovakia's Milan Janešák with Vladimir Simic behind him. 31st of our 38 sleds after the first heat. First heat of 4 here in the two-man bobsleigh World Championships in St. Moritz.
Run. Not the oldest guy in the competition today.
No longer. Oh, horrible skid out of corner 1, having said that it wasn't a problem. Watch out of 2, John. There's a big groove. You can see a bright white groove. When the sled crosses over, you can see it's almost like the start groove. It's so deep.
Besides one of the worst start times, he just did exactly what you cannot do. Oh, these see this? There's the Austrians.
Yep.
The women's drivers are getting ready now for the competition. They're taking a walk up the track.
That's one of the great things about this track, with the natural walls being so thick, you can easily walk along it its whole length if you're a coach or an athlete. 107 kilometers now, still quicker than his first heat, despite that horrible, horrible top end. Down at the bottom, he had 141.7 in heat 1. He should be up into the 142s. 143.7, so good, tidy run out of horseshoe.
107.92 in the first run. 107.50, only 4,200s better, considering the mistakes that he made up there in the wall curve. That wall curve goes for like 150 yards, meters, and it's so tricky to get around there without steering. You know, the more steering, the guy who steers the most does not win this race. But here it is. Look, he's in trouble now. And the back end's out. He should just put things in check and take your medicine and go, which he did there.
But problem then is he's too far right into corner 2.
Yeah, this is how that far that wall goes. It starts and it's round.
Watch as the runners cross that deep groove. I didn't quite see it there, but they drop into it and it sort of leads you on its own little way. Well, next up, a first time in the World Championships or anything at senior level for Benny Meyer of Austria. Sebastian Höfler behind him. His brother Raphael slides in Austria's skeleton team. His dad is the bobsleigh coach. They have got a sister at home, but she doesn't slide, apparently.
It's a bobsled family. I asked Manfred, the father, what's your wife think about this? He put his hand on my shoulder and smiled and said she loves it.
She's resigned to it.
She said it's great. So it's a sliding family. The Meyers of Austria.
They live just a few miles from the Eagles track, and when your dad's in the business, John Morgan, you know this of all people, Dewdrop was a bobsledder all his life. You were at the track probably before you were out of nappies and in short pants.
Choice of going going skiing with a bag lunch, and you're 5, 6 years old, go to the track with my father and the adults. We went to the track. That's where I spent my weekends in the winter in Saranac Lake Placid, New York, like the Meyers.
Yep. Family business. 143.7 is good speed as well. He was the 5th of our starters.
108.04 in the first run. 106. There's his dad, Manfred, on the left there. He's like a second 800s better. Moved up 1 spot, and he's only like 1,500s out of moving up a couple more. So good run for Benny.
Listen, he's never done a World Cup race. His first big race is a World Championship. He's
Look at his drag his
man
toes
off.
up.
Yeah.
He learned how to run there better. He's dragging his toes.
All that comes with experience, doesn't it?
Speeds, finish, bang, brakes come down, and when you're going 88 miles an hour, you want to have a little emphasis on putting the brakes on and the stretch. Yeah. It's an eternity how long that stretch is.
I bet it is. Sebastian Höfler hauling onto those. So, 33rd of our 38 sleds is the first of our 2 Koreans. This is Dong-Yong Kim. He's been in the World Cup this season, joined by Yoon Jung-won. Made his World Cup debut in Whistler at the end of last year as the 2-man driver. Ooh, and skidding and skating.
He made the same mistake in the first run, and you know, the start wasn't great, but it wasn't the worst. But might as well have a bad start if you make a mistake like that on the exit of curve 1. You can't do that on this long 1,700-meter track. The sled you have to be very quiet up top and let the sled start to run. Nash and Dixon, named after the British athletes who won the '64 Olympic Games gold medal. And I think Robin Dixon's here. Today.
I believe he was hoping to come, yes. 104.9 kilometers an hour. He only had 103 in the first heat. Tell you what, though, they're going to be pretty winded at the bottom of this. It was very rocky out of Horseshoe, very rocky out of Tree. Little tap there, 140.5. First heat, 140.4. 107.7, 108.2 first heat, so half a second quicker. Yeah, I bet the coach isn't the only one puffing out his cheeks. I bet the brakeman's going, phew, I'm glad that's over.
You know, he's got a couple years of driving. Boy, the mistake on the exit of 1. And, you know, the mistake when you're going 75, 80 miles an hour is one thing. Watch this exit of Horseshoe to Telephone. He got over there too early. Too much steering, the crossover, the great pictures here. Look at this. Bang.
Came off very late.
Then he goes into the middle of the curve, and then he's got a really panic steer.
Came off very late there. That was a big rib-crunching impact with the wall. Now, next up is teammate Yoon Jung-won with Yoongjin Suk. And for both these Korean drivers, this is the first ever time on the St. Moritz track. So, plenty to see, but, John, so much to learn.
You know, I've been to Pyeongchang, the site of the 2018 Winter Olympic Games. They have built a state-of-the-art push track. And, you know, you can see every year these guys are getting a little bit bigger. They've recruited a very young group of athletes. This much better line than the other Korean sled. But, you know, I would believe if they focus on the technical elements of pushing a bobsled, that Korea will be competitive by 2018. That push track was impressive. And again, the group of athletes that they worked with, they're all young. In the last 2 years I've seen them, they're all getting bigger. They're not getting bigger from eating, they're getting bigger from being in that weight room.
Well, this is a neat and tidy looking run from Yoon Jung-won. He's already overhauled his teammate, 105.8. He only had 104.3 in the first heat.
A lot of steering there, skid. That's what he does here. Yeah, he was a little late for about 3 curves.
Well, he got in front of his teammate. I think he's dropped behind. He has dropped behind Dong-Yong Kim. So
107.90, 108, actually 108.36. So he's 4 tenths, almost a half second better, but he still stays behind his teammate by 3 tenths.
Yeah, 2 tenths slower on that run alone than his teammate, so that little gap between them has opened up into a chasm.
Look at the size of these guys. Look at the thighs on him. Yeah. No, they're not small guys. Look at the high line in Horseshoe, unlike his teammate who crossed over. He came off there a little late. But he did not hit the wall on the take-on Telephone.
Held that speed out of the Horseshoe. Well, next up, 3 of the remaining 4 sleds are debutants on live television and in the World Championships. First for Panama, Eduardo Fonseca with Jonathan Romero behind him. Fonseca started as a brakeman for Panama and moved into the front seat, a former rower, and has only been driving since 2011. So 1 season of driving bobsleighs. This is 2nd year. Panama breaking into the World Championship.
Hildebrand sled.
Yep.
Coached by Hans Hildebrand, who won the 1977 two-man world championships here in St. Moritz. He followed it up 10 years later by winning the 1987 four-man world championships here in St. Moritz. And of course, one of the legendary sled builders. If you could get a hold of a Hildebrand sled in the 80s and 90s, that was the sled of choice. He only built a couple a year, used them himself, and then in the 90s, he would take orders for 3 or 4 sleds a year. And I bet you there's a few other Hildebrand sleds in the race.
Oh, there are quite a few Hilties in the race, and especially here at St. Moritz, because whatever his knowledge is, he always manages to build sleds that produce great speeds. 104.9 for Panama. They had 103.9 in the first heat. So thrilled to be here. You cannot believe how excited this team are.
How about when they were doing the headshots with us there a couple days ago? They were like,
well, you see them get out the sled.
Privileged to walk in our booth.
Another faster run for the Panamanians. This is his 8th trip down the track now. 107.7, 108.4 first heat.
Yeah,
those two guys,
3/4 of a second better.
Those two guys will be in the four-man sled next week.
Done well there. You know,
oh, yeah.
3/4 of a second, but you know, if you get a chance to see him get his helmet off, I mean, listen to them, they're yelling. Listen, they're yelling down there. This little mistake up here. When you're going that fast, that's not too bad, but that puts you late into the next curve. And when you're late in the next curve, then you got to steer. Yeah, baby.
There's a handful of Panamanian supporters here. It's live on TV in Panama as well. I have no idea what unearthly hour it is. I know what time it is in the Ukraine, and let's hope that they're watching their debutants as well. Alexander Shumakov and Andrei Trankuk.
Trankuk, an interesting story, discus thrower. He's a veterinarian.
Wow.
We saw him filling out his bio sheet, and he's a veterinarian. So
well-qualified brakeman.
I told him I had dogs. He said, "Are they sick?" I said, "No, they're healthy." But great, interesting conversation. Great to see Ukraine out here. These are both track and field background athletes. And one of the few sleds in the field did crash in training, and he had some real problems. Shumkov did in Horseshoe. So let's keep our eyes, Nash and Dixon. Watch where he comes down, coming down the wrong side, tap. Now he's gonna let it go up top, watch out.
Double tap.
He does not have any confidence into that curve. He had a bad entry into the curve. And this looks like he just is too much steering.
The timing is gone. He's getting later and later into the corners. Now it's a little more under control, but bear in mind they're doing 80 miles an hour on sheet ice. These things are all but uncontrollable. Wow, and they'll be breathing a big sigh of relief to make it down safely after that trip. Come on the brakes. The driver turns his head round.
0.2 of a second faster, but that was some hellacious ride through Horseshoe. He does get the award. So far, we've seen 75 sleds come down the track. This is the most hellacious. Wrong side of the curve, lets it climb, hits. Look at the back end come around.
Yeah, hits so early.
Oh, these are some pictures. Whoa, look at the back end come down.
It's that is falling off the corner right there. And the brakeman there is in free fall, John. He's off the floor of the sled, praying with every ounce of his fiber.
Back up. There is how to do it and how not to do it. That's how not to do it, but
they got down.
Hey.
They're going to have to do it all again tomorrow.
I think he should give his brakeman a hug.
I think he
Come
should.
on.
Okay, next up, Argentina with Michele Minardi and Paolo Bilieri, 2 Italians making up the Argentine team.
They got off pretty quick.
And these guys start 5:91 in the first heat, 5:86 in the second. So again, John, you've got to think, you know, they were second off the hill. First time they've ever raced with cameras in their face and all of the hoopla here at St. Moritz. They've got to be a bit more relaxed going into the second run.
Well, that name Minardi, Italian background. There's a few Minardis here on the track. These guys got a little Italian background. And but Argentina, they were a bobsled nation for the FIBT in the 30s, and you see some in the 50s. So it's great to see South America represented in the FIBT here.
143 kilometers an hour is quicker by 2 Ks than his first heat, and 108.1. And again, within 500ths of a full second quicker than their first trip down the track. And John, that is now their 8th run down this track. So that's impressive.
getting out of that sled that quick.
Yeah.
Keeping all your extremities inside till you come to a full
after
stop.
88 miles an hour down the straightaway, that probably feels like it's standing still, even if it's not. And our first starter in Heat 1 is our last starter in Heat 2. Motorcycle Grand Prix and Superbike racer Ivan Sola. In the winter, does he put his feet up and train on motocross bikes? No, he goes ice sliding instead. The Croatian's got Drazen Silic behind him, who has already made his World Cup debut as a two-man driver as well.
Yeah, he's a good athlete, track and field background. You know, Ivan is the oldest man in the competition. He's wonderful to
Well, John,
talk to, and he's done more in the sport, you know, for his country. If it wasn't for him, Croatia wouldn't be here at all, and he's just trying to find ways to keep them competing.
You harassed me about taking taxi bob rides. Say, look at the date on your birth certificate. Have you told him that?
I don't think he cares. Plus, he's in the front seat, you know, and he's told me about all the accidents he's had in motorbike. I mean, he's definitely a thrill seeker.
If you step off a motorbike, it's going to hurt a lot more than if you wreck a bobsled, generally.
He's got some experience in wrecking bobsled still. And, you know, there's nerves of steel here. This guy's a pretty brave dude.
Well,
and he's done so much for the sport in Croatia.
He's having a clean run at the moment.
Runs the push championships and split that everybody raves about right on the ocean. And done that a couple times. You know, again, a self-promoter, which, you know, you have to be in the sport, especially in a small nation like Croatia.
Yeah, there's a few small nations where the driver is the sponsor as well. 109.92 again.
Second and a half better.
Yeah, absolutely. Tidier looking run, 109.92 to 111.05 in the first heat. He remains at the foot of our leaderboard, which is headed by Francesco Friedrich of Germany. A little wavy. And again, it's these fast corners that caught him out in the first heat. They're even slicker this time, so the steers he puts in are just not having the same effect, and the tail of the sled skating all over the place. Ivan Sola, a little dent in the visor, look, where he's head-butted the front of the cowling.
Without control.
Out of control, he said.
He wrestled it back down the bottom of the track.
What
51 years old, you know what? I think we might still see him competing on the way up to Korea. So, let's take a look then at our race leader, Francesco Friedrich, the other end of the time scale and the other end of the age scale. 22 years old, the junior world champion in two-man and four-man, fastest in both of the first two heats here in Samoritz. He leads overnight, 2 more heats to go, but that man, his coach Christoph Langen, he's the sort of guy that used to build up 3/10, 4/10 of a second
he
lead.
He won at the 2001 double gold here at St. Moritz, but this Friedrich is an emerging star in the German program.
And he's got a 3500s overnight lead over Bert Hefty of Switzerland. The Swiss a similar margin ahead of Stephen Holcomb, who broke his tie with Alexander Zubkov to go solo into 3rd place. 20 sleds, rounded out by John Jackson of Great Britain, who fought his way in from 22nd place after the first heat. And then the remaining sleds all the way down to Ivan Sola in 38th position. It's a massive field for the Bauhaus FIBT two-man bobsleigh world championship. And on Sunday here in Samoritz, they will go again. In Heat 3, all 38 sleds will run, and in Heat 4, only the fast 20 go through. We'll join Kurt Tomasevich and me, Martin Haven, with John Morgan and the rest of the FIBT TV crew here live from Samoritz to find out who wins the 2013 two-man bobsleigh world championship. 2 heats to decide it here in beautiful Samoritz.